Today I want to share with you something that I think is really important for preppers and for people who are non-preppers. First, I want to tell you just a short little story. If any of you took mythology, you'll know about Cassandra, but for those that didn't, Cassandra was a very, very beautiful woman, and the god Apollo favored her. So he said he'd give her a gift if she'd do what he wanted. So she said, okay, and he gave her the gift of prophecy. But I guess Cassandra was kind of a tease, so she did not follow through on giving him the favors he wanted. So she still had the gift of prophecy, but he also made sure that no one would believe her. So Cassandra saw her beloved city of Troy destroyed. She could see what was going to happen. She was trying to warn people, tell them, and nobody would believe her. So when we refer to a Cassandra, we mean somebody who was right, who predicted events, but for some reason, no one believed them. Well, if you watch many prepper channels at all on YouTube, you see a lot of prophecies, predictions of dire events that are going to happen. And how do you know if these people predicting them are really Cassandras or really just full of bunk, as my aunt would say? I mean, do y'all remember Jade Helm? Right now I read, I don't know if this is true, someone called Rick Wiles, who's on Christian True Story or something like that network, is really predicting dire events in 2 weeks, and you better get all your preps ready. Should you believe somebody like him? Is he just the Christian Alex Jones? Well, sometimes it's hard to determine the difference. Way too often I see on different prepper channels and discussion just kind of like instant belief when a conspiracy theory or a prediction of a future catastrophe comes through. People don't seem to check who gave you the message, what is the origin of the message, is it valid? They just right away make a video and spread that message. And I think this is something we want to be very careful of, especially if we have a YouTube channel. And I've made a couple videos on that. I'll put a link above. And that's why I want to talk to you about this book. It's called Warnings. And it is Finding Cassandra to Stop Catastrophes. So the idea is, who should you believe? And how do you know how to believe them? Well, these two authors, Richard A. Clarke and R.P.Eddy, have tried to come up with kind of a mathematical Cassandra Coefficient, as they call it, to determine if a threat, a warning, is something we should really heed. Both the authors of this book are pretty impressive with their credentials. Richard A. Clarke is a veteran of 30 years in national security and over a decade in the White House. He is now CEO of a cybersecurity consulting firm, and he is author of 7 previous books, including the bestsellers Against All Enemies and Cyber War. R.P.Eddy is the CEO of Ergo, one of the world's leading intelligence firms. His multi-decade career in national security includes serving as director at the White House National Security Council, as a senior U.S. and UN diplomat, and he currently advises intelligence agencies, major corporations, and investors. So, these two authors have the credentials to write such a book, and they do it in a very pleasing manner. It isn't just a textbook, it's well done. So the book gives a lot of examples of true Cassandras in our recent past. For example, one of them was Harry Markopolos, and he was a financial analyst in Boston, and over several years he warned the security commissions against Bernie Madoff, in the Ponzi scheme, and they just didn't pay him any heed. He had all the facts, figures, but unfortunately they didn't have the knowledge to understand those facts and figures. And let's admit it, the crook was very well connected. So, unfortunately, an awful lot of people, organizations, and churches lost money because nobody paid attention to this Cassandra. Another example was Dr. Okamura, a Japanese seismologist. very well respected in his field, and he kept saying that what they were doing at Fukushima was not, the barriers and the protections was not enough if there would be a really bad earthquake, typhoon, etc. And he kept telling everybody, but of course this would cost a lot of yen and nobody was listening to him. So we had that disaster. And there's quite a few other examples in the book. It really makes interesting reading. And one of the things the book really goes into detail about is cognitive psychology. And that's something I'm interested in. I think it's a very, if I was going to college today, I probably would have majored in it. I think it's terribly, terribly interesting. But we all have biases. And some of those biases are needed. You know, when you see a gun, it means this. You know, when you see this, do this. You don't want to have time to think. So our brain develops certain patterns and filters so we know how to react. Should we stay or should we flee, so to speak? But we do that, our brain does that same thing for other events, and it can cause us to cloud our thinking or come up with a decision that really isn't accurate. And of course, one of the things really confusing things is fake news. What is fake? What is true? Well, we have to all be careful because of those cognitive biases, we want to believe certain news. So if we're a Trump supporter, let's say, we view anything pro-Trump as true and anything against him as fake news. And vice versa. And if we believe Christian news sites, we might believe their take on science as opposed to scientists' take, and you know, vice versa. Our biases will cloud what we see and hear. We want to hear things that go along with what we already believe. So that kind of goes into the Cassandra effect. We have to be very careful. And one of the things that has been proven is if something is said often enough on the news, it becomes true in our mind, whether it is proven wrong in the future. We still remember it as true. So, very hard to know if something is fake news or real. So a Cassandra event involves 4 components. 1, you know, the prediction, the threat, the warning. 2, the decision makers, who has the power to do something about this threat or warning. And 3, the Cassandra or possible Cassandra themselves. And then 4, the critics. Let's talk about that a little. So the Cassandras that were true Cassandras often are data driven, they're technical experts, but sometimes their personality just gets in the way of the message. You just don't like this person, or they don't seem believable, even though they have the credentials. And a lot of times they're just high anxiety. But I guess you would be too if you knew something was going to happen and you've been trying to tell people for a long time. You would probably be pretty anxious anyway. So a lot of people don't listen to the message just because of who is delivering the message. So the Cassandra Coefficient looks over those 4 areas we already discussed. And a lot of times for the warning or threat, it is pretty technologically complex. So you need a lot of other experts to determine, to go into the data and see if this is correct or not. And for number 2, the decision makers, there's something called the bystander effect, where everybody thinks that, hey, this might be true, but I don't have the power to do anything about it, and nobody does anything. Very dangerous. And number 3, the Cassandra and the prediction. Have they made a lot of predictions in the past? You know, think of your Alex Jones, and they haven't come true. Well, they could have called wolf several times, and this really is a wolf, but that definitely strikes against the potential Cassandra. And you have to look hard at the critics who are arguing against this possible Cassandra's warning. Are they arguing on the merit of the data given, or are they just arguing against the person's credentials, against their character, that type of thing? Really, it should be talking about the threat and the data. Now, other things happen, like with the warning itself. Is it really outlandish? You know, have aliens really landed on Earth and they are puppet masters for world leaders? Pretty outlandish. Love to see the data on that. But you kind of get the idea. Who would believe that? And there are a couple other things that go in there. If it's never ever occurred before, you can have the initial occurrence syndrome. So, hey, it's never happened. Why would we think it would happen now? And we see that a lot lately. And then it can also, because of the magnitude of the incidents, it's just so big, how can we wrap our head around it? So instead we'll stick our head in the sand like an ostrich and just ignore it. And of course the decision makers also might want to just completely ignore it because of the cost factor. Or they don't really know if it is solvable. Or often because of politics. It just isn't politically feasible at this time to deal with that. And we have to make sure that the critics don't have a political or personal benefit for not believing in what the possible Cassandra is saying. So as you can see, pretty complex. And I'm giving you a little table here that I copied out of the book, and it gives you an idea of all the different things they're looking at, but you really need to read the book to understand how each of these things is evaluated. But I wanted to give it to you so you could see the full scope of the Cassandra Coefficient. Now the last chapters of the book are rated according to the Cassandra Coefficient to some of the things that they think these Cassandras might, the actual Cassandras I should say, not false Cassandras. And one of them is artificial intelligence, another worry is the Internet of Things, and another one is pandemic. And there's many others, I'm just not going to go into them. Again, read the book. I don't want to take the joy of reading something like this away from you by giving you the cliff notes, so to speak. So I love the book. As you can see, I had a whole bunch of tabs in for things I wanted to go back to, things I wanted to remember. But after reading this, I got thinking, you know, I have my own biases. Now, something that's been in the news, out of the news, is did the Russians tamper with our election? Is that one of the reasons we have Trump for president? Well, if you have certain biases, like you don't respect our current president, you might want to believe that. If you elected our current president and you're a firm backer, you're going to say, hey, that's all fake news, whatever. But you got to go past your cognitive filters, whatever, biases, and really look at the issues. Is there something going on here? Try to apply the Cassandra Coefficient and see what you think. So the possible Cassandra is Richard Steele. He was a United Kingdom Russian expert, and he was a past head of MI6, which is the British intelligence agency. So he's got some pretty good credentials. While Mr. Trump was running for president, Mr. Steele had compiled a dossier on Trump and said that he had compromising relationships with the Kremlin and was involved with Russia helping to fix our election. Pretty damaging stuff. And he gave all of this information to U.S. media outlets, and none of them published it because they said they didn't have enough fact-checking. And so no one heard about this until after Trump was elected president. So we kind of have first occurrence syndrome here. I mean, we've never had a foreign country that we know of interfering in our elections before, so it sounds pretty unlikely. It also sounds kind of outrageous. It sounds more like maybe a Hollywood movie like The Manchurian Candidate or something. You know, are they influencing President Trump? I mean, it does sound pretty ridiculous. But the truth is, the facts are still coming to light. We don't know. So, is Mr. Steele a Cassandra, or is he a false prophet? It'll be interesting to see what the future proves, but I'd love to know what you think below. And this is Prepper Potpourri saying, I highly recommend getting this book. It is a great read, and I think you will be happy you purchased it. As always, thank you very, very much for your continued support, and subscribe and share the knowledge. Thumbs up if you like this video.